Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan McCall, and we've reached the final presentation of the semester. I hope you all have had a wonderful semester so far and are enjoying your holiday season. This week's topic is on the American welfare state in the international perspective. The nations of the world are classified into three parts. This really came about after World War II with the intensification of the Cold War. Then we have first world countries, which are the industrial nations of the capitalist West. Most of Europe, Western Europe, and the United States and other countries like that make up the first world classification. Our second world classification are the communist nations that constructed political economies as an alternative to the market-dominated first world. So this was really run by the Soviet Union. And other nations like China. And then we have our third world nations. They are nations that were former colonies of the first world and later achieved their own independence. Now, this classification fell apart with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the fall of the Soviet Union. The Second World lost half of its members when the Soviet Union fell. The Third World changed dramatically over this time. And some countries, specifically in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, made substantial economic gains, taking them out of the third world economically. Other third world countries, though, lost much of their capital, and a new classification was created, the fourth world. Once the Cold War was coming to a close, the first world countries pulled back a lot of their foreign aid to third world countries, basically because they didn't need to impress the third world countries anymore, and they didn't see the need to separate themselves from the communist nation. The idea of American exceptionalism is quite a topic in international welfare. The United States, we really do not compare favorably to the European social welfare state when it comes to public welfare provisions, meaning the government handling much of the social welfare. But when you add the private sector expenditures here in the United States, we are second in social welfare resources for our citizens. What is American exceptionalism? It is basically the wide variety of interests that we have by many different groups in the United States stands in the way of us having a comprehensive and a single national system of social welfare for all of our citizens. We have 50 states. These states have their own ideas of how they want their state to be run, and it's very difficult for all of us to come together, as we see in our federal government and the existence of the divisions that live there. A major change happened in the American welfare state that influenced the international perspective. Franklin Delano Roosevelt created the largest social welfare agenda in American history with the New Deal. But after World War II, many presidents continued to promote this agenda, or at least tolerated the agenda, until Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. He decided to turn the American welfare state into a more conservative social welfare agenda. This is when the private sector took on a much more prominent role in American social welfare policy. Soon this conservative view spread to the United Kingdom and throughout Europe, which still influences our international perspective today. That fourth classification of the fourth world is really defined by something called entrenched poverty. And this is when a nation's population is living on less than $1.25 a day. And these are the countries that are in desperate need of social welfare help. Something called the Millennium Development Goals were created to help bring the fourth world out of this entrenched poverty. And there's 6 steps that were needed to be met. One, they needed primary education for all of the children. Two, adequate nutrition for vulnerable populations. The third is access to anti-malarial beds, which is a big, big concern in countries in Africa and South America. Access to potable water and sanitation, just good, solid drinking water is a huge concern, especially in Africa. A half kilometer of paved roads per 1,000 people in the population, just so goods and resources can be moved more easily through these fourth world countries. And access to cooking fuels and stoves that will reduce indoor pollution. So when these 6 goals are met or are trying to be met, a fourth world can move itself out of this entrenched poverty. Now, there is an idea called capability poverty, and this kind of came about with, I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, Amartya Sen. And the idea that they had were that there was two basic pillars of this capability poverty, and that was that there are no records of famine within democratic societies because of the amount of economic resources available to them. And because of that, there are really no instances of war being waged between democratic societies because they have all that they need within their own nation. There's no reason to go and try to take what you need from another nation. Now, Martha Nussbaum kind of expanded on this idea of capability poverty with the idea that optimal development is not only freedom from want, but also the full enjoyment of a range of social and political opportunities. It's not just enough to give people food and water. We must be able to give them the capacity to change their social world and give them political opportunities to further their country and the population that lives within that country. I loved this quote. This is an Amartya Sen quote. Poverty is not just a lack of money. It is not having the capability to realize one's full potential as a human being. And that should be our goal as we move forward in the international social welfare world. Okay, so I'm going to focus on this global capital a lot, especially with the article that I will introduce here in a minute. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, is an international agency accountable to all of its member nations. And the main purpose of this of the IMF was to stabilize currency and to help finance debt within global markets. So really, it's a stabilizing factor for all of the nations in the world, and basically the G20, which are the 20th largest economic nations in the world, pretty much run the International Monetary Fund. Within the International Monetary Fund are things called special drawing rights, or SDRs. These are loans that are given to third world and fourth world countries that encourage the expansionary policies in developing nations. So these loans are given to help with, especially now, as you'll see in the article, I'm talking about vaccines, to give people potable water to drink, things along those lines. And then we also have the World Bank, it provides resources to enhance the infrastructure in the third world countries. All of these things work together to help bring a more stable life for many of these populations in these third and fourth world countries. So the article I picked was from the New York Times in July 9 of this year. The title of the article is "The IMF Board Backs $650 Billion Aid Plan to Help Poor Countries." So the IMF planned to issue $650 billion in reserved funds that poor countries can use to buy vaccines, finance healthcare, and pay down the debt. Now, the pandemic drained many of the resources available to poorer countries, leaving them without the necessary means to combat COVID-19 as the pandemic wore on and on and on. So what the IMF did was they used their special drawing rights to finance loans to these countries. And it was the largest such expansion of these funds in the IMF's history. Now, the Biden administration has decided to support this expansion of the IMF reserves, but reversing a Trump administration policy. And this decision upset a lot of Republicans, in fact, who did not see the need for us to expand these reserves to these countries. But the Biden administration went ahead and has decided to support this $650 billion aid plan. So, what is the NSAW's international policy on human rights? It's actually quite extensive, and I do recommend going to Social Work Speaks and reading all of the different bullet points on how the NASW international policy on these human rights works. It's actually quite fascinating, and I think you would get a lot out of it. But the three I want to focus on are to support the right to a standard of living that is adequate for the health and well-being of all people and their families, without exception, and the essential resources to meet such a standard. Adequate housing, basic health care, education, security in the event of unemployment, chronic illness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood beyond one's control, and necessary social services. That's a lot. But it is what we strive for as social workers here in the United States, so we want to extend that to the international world. Secondly, to work in collaboration with non-governmental organizations and community groups when entitlements are non-existent or inadequately implemented, and to become a leading force for the health and welfare of all people. That is a strong, strong statement, and one that I highly agree with. And third, to advocate, engage, and support the social work professions as a critical partner with the United Nations in advancing human development and human rights, including economic human rights, and closing the economic gap. The economic gap in America is wide, but the economic gap between first world countries and fourth world countries is massive, and it's something that we do need to focus on. Okay, so here are my three discussion questions for you this week. Please answer 1, 2. You can answer all three if you'd like. First, should the United States, which lags behind smaller industrialized nations with respect to the percentage of the gross national product, their GNT, which is committed to international aid, should the United States commit more of its yearly budget to international social welfare? Secondly, are private organizations inside the United States better suited to give international aid than the public form of aid through governmental agencies? And third, have you ever given to an international social welfare organization such as UNICEF or the Save the Children Fund? And if so, what led you to contributing? Here are my references, and obviously the textbook, my article, and the Social Works Speaks. I look forward to the discussion. It is quite an interesting topic, and one that I know divides Americans right down that center of the Republican and Democratic lines. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on our international social welfare policy here in the United States. Again, I wish you all the best and a happy holidays and a happy new year. And I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.